Welcome to Sex Help for Smart People. I'm Dr. Laura Jurgens. I'm here to help you have better sex, intimacy, and relationships. So let's get at it.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 73. I am so glad you're here for this interview I'm doing with Caitlin V, who is a wonderful sex coach and has some special classes, particularly for men, about coming when you want to, not sooner than you want to. So we're going to talk today about premature ejaculation, or PE as it's often called. And I think you're really going to enjoy this interview. I am super happy to welcome Caitlin V today. And Caitlin, I'm going to have you introduce yourself because I know you are the expert on you, but I just want you to know I'm really glad you're here. Will you tell us a little bit about you?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me to be here. I'm Caitlin V. I'm a sex and relationship coach. I'm a YouTuber and a host of Good Sex on HBO Max. And for the last 10 years, I have really been focused on working specifically with men and male sexuality and sexual dysfunction. And that's become my here and on the internet.
I love that so much. So we are going to talk about men. One of the big issues for men, which is premature or like earlier than you want ejaculation today, men ejaculating before they'd like to, with, a lot of men have the aim of lasting longer especially during penetrative sex. And I am so curious about your approach because I have one approach that I've learned from the Smatica Institute and it's worked great, but we all know there are more ways to approach an issue, and the more tools we have, the wider range of people we can serve. And so I would love to hear about yours and just like what you do. But first, for men out there with PE issues, and of course, people of all genders partnered with them, it might be understandable to wonder how you and I come to be discussing this when we don't have penises.
Yeah,
Why we care, how we know anything about it. So I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit about your background on this issue and in men's sexuality in general, and just why you think this is so important?
So the way that I became an expert in male sexuality was very unexpected. It wasn't like something that I chose. I was working as a researcher before I became a coach, and my focus then was really on bisexual women. And when I started coaching, I sort of figured that I would continue to work with populations that were like me. And then I was featured on a YouTube video on someone else's channel, and the subject was squirt. And squirting is very popular on the internet, and it happens to be a very popular search for men who are dealing with some kind of performance anxiety, especially premature ejaculation. They wanted to learn more about it as like a thing that they could do to sort of compensate for what they perceive to be lack that they had in bed. And so I went from coaching kind of a little bit of like more of a generalist, to having thousands of men, many of whom were dealing with premature ejaculation, asking for me to coach them. And I developed my methodology around working with PE organically by working one-on-one with hundreds of men who are dealing with it. And, it's very interesting. I hear, especially on the comments on YouTube and all over why should I trust a woman to coach me on something that is like very explicitly related to my penis, right? And there's a couple different ways that I like to handle that question. Number one, I like to say botanists aren't plants, but that doesn't mean that they're not experts at all things related to it. Doesn't mean that they don't understand the process of photosynthesis, right? And sometimes when we are outside of something, we can understand it a lot more holistically than if we are inside of it. And I think a lot of the men who, especially in space as an influencer on the internet, have kind of worked on or solved their own ejaculation can't necessarily speak to all men, right? Because it's just their own individual experience, right? At the same time, I think a lot of people really prefer to take, a cisgender woman, and my perspective on sex and sexuality, having been with men, right? I have seen penises up close and personal and experienced men's sexuality from a lot of different men. And I think there are a lot of people who organically understand that and see that having a woman's take, especially if they are straight and they have with women, that is a valuable perspective because it exists outside of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think sometimes people feel more comfortable talking to women about things that are a little sensitive around, some male identity, like because our identities are so wrapped up in our sexuality and our penises, if we have them.
Yeah, and I think talking to women as helpers, as caregivers, as confidants comes very naturally to a lot of men.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for sharing that, because I just wanted to kind of get that one out of the way, since sometimes people do wonder. I love the botanists are not plants analogy. I think that's a wonderful one. So, great. So what do you think, from your experience, are the most common causes underlying PE?
I think in almost all cases, like certainly the great majority, it comes down to performance anxiety, pressure, and tension, right? And another way of saying that is it comes from a relationship to body that is grounded in expectations, pressure, and a lack of connection.
Yeah.
As opposed to a real ability to be present with arousal, be present with sensation, and to remain connected to our own body, and then through our body to our partner's body. But I'm also curious to hear your thoughts. And like, I'm not familiar with how the Somatica Institute addressed premature ejaculation. So I'm kind of curious to see where we're together and where we might.
Totally. And I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of overlap, and maybe just some and I would say that, I'm just one person who's taken their lessons and, applied it in my practice. And so the way I talk about it might not be the same way that like Danielle and Celeste, who founded Somatica, would talk about it. But I agree with you in a lot of ways. I think I would just, for me, I always say it differently in my head than the way you said it, but I think it's the same thing, which is essentially so not just the pressure and the sort of performance orientation, and then also a habit. In my experience, there's also a lot of habit that gets wrapped up in things, because we get shamed for masturbation early on. And a lot of boys are kind of hiding their masturbation and trying to get it over quickly early on as teenagers. They also get into a bit of a somatic habit with the body, where they're used to going from 0 to 10, with 10 being like, I'm about to come, there's no way I'm stopping, right? And they're used to going from 0 to 10 really fast. And so their body gets kind of trained at that. And then there's also this sort of for some men, there's like a little bit of scarcity mindset around sex. We get that anxiety that you're talking about comes in, well, I have to make the most of this opportunity. Or when you're a teenager, oh, this girl's willing to make out with me, and oh my gosh, she's wants to have sex with me. And now I gotta there's this anxiety and tension that grows in the body. And that disconnection that you're talking about from the self is also not from your own physical somatic experience, is not allowing you to calm down and really release some of the tension in the pelvis. That tension in the pelvis builds and kind of contributes to the whole thing, in my experience.
Yeah. That, orgasm, one definition of orgasm is the pleasurable release of tension. So if you're going to any sort of touch or sex or intercourse with a ton of tension, you are already that much closer to orgasm. And so you're not really setting yourself up for success if you're feeling a ton of tension. And yes, 1,000 times over, that scarcity mindset, and add to that all the pressure of am I going to get it right? And be able to please her, and I'm going to satisfy her. And the greatest irony of that is the more that we focus on satisfying our partner, the less that we're actually inside of our own body. And I think we could also talk about the influence of porn on that as well, because porn does a lot to remove us from our body and to get us out of our bodily, our groundedness, and then to export a lot of our turn on onto a screen or outside of ourselves, and then to train ourselves. Humans are really, really good at getting to, especially the male bodies are particularly good at getting genetic material out, because that's how we continue our species. And so when it learns visual turn on, some amount of stimulus, ejaculation, we pattern that over and over and over again. The human brain, our software and hardware we're operating, especially the old stuff, is great, mission accomplished, done, right? And so it takes time to decondition that, but just as easily as we can train our brain to do that, we can also train them away from it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So what about some of the practical issues that you find men with penises don't understand when it comes to PE. Do you think there's anything that people are just assuming like that you think is just wrong in terms of how they approach it?
Oh my gosh, yes. Only because I've heard it 1,000 times. So I think number one, a lot of men believe erroneously that their penis are just more sensitive than the average man's, right? I hear this over and over and over again. You just don't get it, Caitlin. I'm just more sensitive. I'm just super sensitive. And it's like, you know what? The clit is super sensitive too, right?
Yeah, twice as sensitive as a whole penis. Yeah,
we have so many more nerve endings. And yet you don't find that we, orgasm with just like a few strokes, right? This thing doesn't really work for me because the average male penis is average for a reason, right? It's about average in size. It's average in length. Like it's average in the number of nerve endings. It's not that your penis has more nerve endings in it. It's that nerve endings have been trained in a really particular way. So the good news with that is, I always like to say that I'm reading a book right now, and I was just writing this last night. Like, congratulations on being average. Actually, like that. There's a statistical significance to that, and it doesn't mean anything bad. It means that you're probably in the middle of the pack on most things, right? And then you'll be an outlier on a couple things too. Just like statistically, this is the law of averages, right? So if other men can train their bodies to last longer and can change, I don't want to decrease sensitivity. I'm very against decreasing or even disassociating from your body. I don't think that things like numbing sprays are really a viable solution to premature ejaculation. There is some evidence that supports that men who use them learn that they can last longer, and then they are able to recreate that without the numbing sprays. But in my opinion, I just want to teach you to that sensitivity differently so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming, right?
Yeah, it's more totally like possible. How you relate to that sensation than it is the sensation itself. And I hear you saying, actually, you're probably normal, like you're probably normal, and you just have, and it's also, this is so common. It is so common.
One third of men.
Yeah.
One out of three deal with premature ejaculation at one point in their life. So super common, but we don't hear about it as much as say erectile dysfunction because there's no medication that can widely be prescribed. So there's really no money in treating premature ejaculation, right? So yes, doctors do prescribe off-label SSRIs, which are anti-anxiety, antidepressant drugs. They prescribe what's supposed to be a sub-perceptible dose of those. It changes the levels of serotonin in the brain, and serotonin is directly related to ejaculation, but it can also kill libido. It can actually give you depression or anxiety if you don't already deal with it. Like there are side effects for these medications. And again, there's just not a lot of money to be made on premature ejaculation. So it doesn't have the same sort of media coverage and cultural attention as erectile dysfunction does. It also happens to be that erectile dysfunction is more common in older men who have more resources and more capacity to address those, more money to spend on those challenges. But to get back to your original question, the other thing that I hear a lot from men, especially younger men, is that they've developed a workaround and they just commit to the workaround instead of doing the work to actually address the premature
like the dissociation or the trying to think of baseball or whatever that kind of thing is.
That, or they're like, well, I'll just masturbate real quick in the morning, have a date. I'll try to, give myself an orgasm as, close to the date as possible. Or, I have a short refractory period. So the first round of intercourse it lasts 3 minutes, but then I'll have sex again and it'll last like 15 or 20 or even longer. I commend people for doing problem solving.
Yeah, everybody's just trying to figure it out the best they can.
Yeah,
if totally. They're trying to figure it out in a way that helps please their partner, I commend them for that too.
And I think a lot of that problem solving actually doesn't work to please your partner.
Yeah,
right? Because
agreed.
Having to, when you ejaculate, and there's nothing wrong with that, but if you ejaculate like earlier in the morning on the date, like it might be nice for you to save all of that erotic energy and have it sort of to share with your partner, right? You may approach sex a little bit differently. Not wrong to feel satisfied and satiated. Maybe that actually helps to calm your nerves. Maybe that actually helps you to be more present with her, to take things more slowly, get you out of the scarcity mindset because your body's ejaculated more recently. But it may also be in higher service partner's pleasure for you to like have that energy, but know how to work with it, know how to shape it and to use it to your advantage. There's no wrong way of doing this, but it's not. And also, let's just be real. You're the adult, you have a job. It might not be feasible for you to have an ejaculation before every. Not just that, but I tell all of my clients and everyone who watches my content to make sure that you're never masturbating for 15 to 20 minutes, right? Because I want you to train your body to extend the period of time between arousal and ejaculation. So now we're talking about, do you have an extra 20 minutes, maybe 25? It's all said and done because you got to like, get turned on and you got to clean up afterward. And, hopefully you take a minute to like bask in post-orgasmic glow. Like this could now be a bunch of time, really. And then like, what if you don't have time and your partner, like it's not a really long-term workable solution. It's a Band-Aid, right?
Yeah, agreed. And it could be counteractive, like you said, if they're doing it really quickly and now you're reinforcing the same nervous system habit.
Yeah. And not to mention that may work okay in your 20s, your 30s, maybe even your 40s. But as your refractory period lengthens with age, that is not going to be a workable solution for you forever. Right. And I just don't want you to have to rely on something that isn't actually any sort of solve, right? That doesn't actually really address the thing. The other thing is very related for my guys who are like, well, that's okay. I can just go multiple rounds. Yes. Today, these circumstances in this body, right? And they tend to be in like relationships that are newer. They tend to be like early 30s. Once you're in a more established relationship, like that may not work for you and your partner. But here's the other thing. As a woman, it doesn't feel great to have a quick round of sex or a quick round of intercourse followed by a longer round of intercourse. It may be totally fine, but it's not necessarily like what everyone is choosing together, right? Again, it is a workaround.
Yeah.
And, I've had clients who will have sex with someone, but then they're like, after the first round, like they don't want to give her any more oral sex, or they don't want to do that. They don't want to do like they're the range of options that are available to them by doing this multiple rounds workaround.
Yeah. And if you always have to have sex in a certain way that your partner doesn't really have any input on, we've got a problem here. Because now they're just trying to have sex in a way that validates them.
Yes.
Instead of actually trying to connect with the partner in a way that your partner actually wants to have, to be having sex. And most women are not ready to have penetrative sex really quickly right away anyway. So
it doesn't necessarily feel great to have like 3 minutes.
Great. I mean, it really doesn't feel great to have a dick in your pussy until you are like really, really ready for it. And that typically takes 30 to 45 minutes of foreplay.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you're really ready for it. And then it's like 3 minutes of that. And then pause.
Oh, and then when you're really ready for it, you want more than 3 minutes of that.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. So again,
or 30 seconds in some cases. Yeah,
exactly. So workarounds, totally appreciate the problem solve, but
they don't really
men
work.
who are if you're willing to actually treat the cause and not the symptom, it's like, yes, you can take Excedrin every time you have a headache, right? But you also could do the work to stop having headaches to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, way better. And our culture will tell us constantly, because we just have such a like advertising capitalist driven society. We're so trained to want to go for that silver bullet. Let's just take a pill. But wouldn't we rather address the underlying issue and not have the problem in the first place?
And this is one other issue, I think, is that it's really highly normalized. I'm very privileged in that the men that come to work with me and watch my videos and that I like come into contact with are really dedicated to being great lovers, right? That's why they're on my channel to begin with. And so it's such a pleasure to work with, because that's the baseline that they're starting from. But we have normalized as a culture, very short lasting. We've normalized that intercourse is something that women give to men or allow men to do to them. And men have normalized for themselves, and this also, I'm not anti-porn as a whole, but like we have to talk its influence here.
Yeah, when it's the only sex education we have in our whole society, and it's not education, it's just entertainment.
It's entertainment. Yeah. So all of this combined together, and naturally men and women have this view of sex that it is like for men to enjoy and for women to sort of put up with. And in that context, then a man lasting for like 30 seconds or even just like 6 minutes and a woman not having an orgasm, it's like doesn't really exist problem inside of that framework.
Yeah.
Right.
And then people wonder why their female partners wind up with zero libido.
Yeah.
Because the sex was never for them in the first place. And then people are like, oh, it's my hormones. It's not your hormones.
Right.
You haven't been getting sex that was for you for years.
Yeah. Or pain, long-term pain, discomfort,
absolutely.
right? Because these not warmed up. They're not being treated, with kindness. We
Yep.
we would warm up before we would run a marathon, right? And yet the way that we treat the vulva and vagina is like it should just be ready to have a
as if it's
marathon
a
run
vending
on
machine.
it at any
Yeah.
given moments. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we are 100% on the same page on that. So, y'all, what we're talking about is a totally different approach to sex. And it does require some new rewiring of how we approach it and new learning. So, Caitlin, for you, what is your approach? What if you could just give it to us in like kind of a nutshell, or if you have steps you can outline, how do you usually work with people to approach PE? I am so excited. Our retreat is live and open for registration. Do not miss this. If you are a person who identifies as a woman, this is the greatest gift you could ever give to yourself. It is the exact retreat I wish that I had been able to attend to just really jumpstart authentic joy. If you need a recharge, we want to make that happen. It is in Maui, Hawaii, January 15th to 18th, 2026. An early bird discount is open this week only. So go to my website, laurajurgens.com/retreat, and you'll get the link to all of the details and the registration info. I can't wait to go to Hawaii with you.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to start by saying it doesn't have to be hard. We are talking about a totally different perspective, angle, approach related to sex and sexuality. And it does take a little bit of work. It's a little uncomfortable. There's some rewiring stuff, but it doesn't have
it can be fun.
Hard. It can be super fun, and it's very, very rewarding. I like to say the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So if you rewire the way that you do sex and sexuality, you can expect to achieve different experiences and benefits. And like it will bleed over into the other areas of your life as well. So you can have a great sex life and it to like up level all areas in your life, and it doesn't have to be hard. So with that as the foundation for everything else, my methodology, it started with premature ejaculation, but I have expanded it. It's the same methodology, the same approach for erectile dysfunction, for delayed ejaculation. It always starts with the body. For premature ejaculation, that means the way that we physically relate to the body. In other words, the way that you masturbating for 15 to 20 minutes a minimum, not always ejaculating when you masturbate, because again, we want to train your body that like you could experience a lot of sensation and you may not end in ejaculation. That's not necessarily a given, right? Begin to train the body, scramble that pathway that goes always if A, then always B. Right. I like to change up their masturbation routines, different times of day, different body position, a different erotic material. Maybe we get rid of porn altogether. Maybe we switch to still images, just one porn star, or just still images of your actual partner. Maybe we get rid of erotic images altogether and we switch to a different kind of erotic stimulation, like a meditation or any of the incredible audio erotica that exists out there. Maybe we get rid of it entirely. I also teach of relating to the pelvic floor, including doing reverse Kegels, so that because a tight pelvic floor is a strong pelvic floor. And a lot of the ways that men exercise or work out actually ends up tightening and shortening their pelvic floor. So again, that increases tension, puts you closer to orgasm. And then breath work, because, and I think breath work sounds like kind of woo, but we're breathing all of the time. It's just utilizing this. It's just the same way that like changing your diet, because we're always eating, changing the way that we breathe so that we can have a different relationship with our nervous system when we go into either sex with a partner or into masturbation. And also like before we go into a meeting with the boss, right? So like utilizing these tools that come directly from the body in order to begin to reshape the relationship with the body. And I start with the body for a couple of reasons. Number one, like if I was working with someone with ED, I want to start with the body because the erection is the body's check engine light. Something else may be going on physiologically. But with premature ejaculation, when we start working immediately with the body, that gives it the most amount of time to transform, right? When you start going to you don't expect that you're going to walk out with a six pack after your first session or even after your sixth session.
And I wish it worked like that. But every time I do like a massive deadlift session, I'm like, how come my ass isn't twice as big when I'm walking out of the gym?
Yeah. Right. And it incrementally shifts over time. I didn't start working out seriously until I was like in my mid 30s. And it took 2 years really of working out. I do Pilates 2 times a week to like really have body feel significantly differently
Different. Yeah.
than it did. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it doesn't, and the interesting thing is, even though it feels very different to inhabit my body doesn't always look very different. Some days it does, some days it doesn't, right? It's sort of this thing that like we have to commit to the practice of it because it is slow. The body is slow. It's in the 3D. It's always going to move slower. It's meant to move slower. That's a good thing. So after we address the body, we address the mind, the thoughts, the ticker tape of words and beliefs and things that we, for the most part, have like ingrained in ourselves as true related to sex and sexuality. Like, I can never change this. I'll never get better. She's unsatisfied. I'm not enough. Those things I was mentioning earlier, like sex is something that she's putting up with. I'll never be loved. Like, women don't actually want to accept me. It's what it is, right? Like all the negative beliefs and then some of the empowering beliefs too. But we always move to addressing those. And I think men, this is one of the reasons that I love working with men. In my experience, women are a little bit more willing to have some degree of malleability with those thoughts. I think like a lot of women, and let me not paint with too broad of a brush here, but in my coaching experience, a lot of women are like willing to recognize that some of the things that we think are not necessarily true. We don't necessarily know which ones, right? Of course, it doesn't matter what gender you identify as. There are some beliefs that you have that you're just like gripping onto, white knuckling. Nope, I know this is true. No matter what, I am definitely enough.
And most humans, we think if we think it, that it must be true, even though that is absolutely not the case.
And I have found that for men, especially, I think because they are not culturally conditioned from childhood to maybe question themselves or question their beliefs in the same way. Obviously, this is part of patriarchal conditioning, and it's not great for women, right? It's not good that we are raised to constantly be questioning ourselves. But on the opposite side, it's not great that men are raised not to do that, right? Because they have a death grip on some of these thoughts. We spend a lot of time, my clients, disentangling and really challenging, how can you know that that's true? And they, I use this case that came up in my men's coaching group with one of my clients. I never meet single women. And he insisted, and I kept asking week over week, where do I go to meet single? Where do I go? And I kept saying, man, I don't have the answer for that. There's no one answer. And I finally kind of lost my cool. And I went to the whole coaching group and I said, okay, everyone, flood the Zoom chat, every single place you've ever met a single woman. And it was like the library, the auto repair shop, the DMV, front of the street corner, at my parents' friend's cousin's wedding, right? Like, the truth was that he was capable of meeting single women, and single women were around him. Actually, side note, this guy ended up dating one of his neighbors. So single women were literally with him from 9 to 5. And he wasn't seeing them because he had such an intensely held belief that he didn't and could not meet them. So it goes from physical body to the mental body. Then we do the emotional body. And again, something I love working with men is that men generally deal with something called normative male alexithymia, which is an inability to name and process our emotions as fully. And it's something that's conditioned. And it's something that the world really rewards in men, right? Just stuff it down, don't feel anything. Anger is the only acceptable emotion, right? All emotions should get routed through anger.
And I think they're also allowed pride. Whereas women are those are the two ones women are disallowed while we're socialized.
Totally. You're a bitch if you're proud and angry, right? Which we have so many reasons to be both.
Yeah, but there's a whole host of beautiful other human emotions and difficult human emotions that it's true that boys are socialized to really stuff down, and it does a disservice to everybody.
Yeah. And it's true also that if you repress one emotion, you repress all emotions. You don't get to just repress sadness and then not also repress joy. Right. Exactly. It happens to all of them all at the same time. So one of my greatest joys in coaching is helping men to just experience their emotions as like safe and appropriate and acceptable, because they get so much power. I mean, we all do. I had the same thing. This is one of the reasons that it's so natural for me to coach. Like I said, I mean, when they started coming to me because of YouTube, it was like a natural fit. I was like, oh, this is what I'm meant to do. And part of that is because I also was raised in the United States in the 80s and 90s, and I'm from the Midwest. And, I was raised to like work hard, don't trouble other people with your emotions. If anything, like keep those to yourself. Kind of at best. And at worst, just don't feel them at all. And so it's been a journey for me to have safety of experience.
Midwesterners, man, we're just supposed to talk about the weather.
Right. And we're good
Well-
at it too. We're so good
Yeah.
at it, and I laugh because now I live in California. And so I get to confront sort of my Midwestern condition on a regular basis and all the ways in which I like really value, especially things related to hard work and suppress. Like you could always be working harder and you could always be feeling less. And this is common for men, how men across the country and across the globe are raised. So physical, mental, emotional, and then and only then do we look at the relationship. A lot of guys, again, you asked me like what some of their kind of most common
Misconceptions.
myths
Yeah.
and misconceptions were. A lot of people believe that it is their relationship that is causing thing that they're dealing with. Sometimes they are right? If you can get hard or you can last as long as you want, or you can reach orgasm when you're not with your partner, there are things related to your relationship that are influential on the way that your dick and your orgasm and your ejaculation are behaving, right? But it is not your relationship that is causing those things, right? So the relationship is influential. We don't start at the relationship because sex starts with ourself. A lot of people have the experience of like sex is something only that we do with other people and in relationship to other people. But as you know, and as you're smart, it's not, right? It's something that starts with us. It stays with us until we take our very last breath. Our sexuality is our own. It's uniquely ours. So then we bring the relationship in. We talk about, maybe the partner's expectations, but more often it's a lack of communication that's going on inside of the relationship. He thinks she wants this or needs this. She is just trying to appease him and like appease his ego, and she's faking orgasms and no one's talking about it, whatever it is.
Yep.
We bring that in, and then as we work on that piece, we eventually make our way to a evacuation or an we start to unearth some of the deeper things that extraction, that's the word I was looking for. We start to extract some of the other beliefs that we have that come from like our culture or family. And eventually we make our way all the way to sex as a spiritual experience, because that's where even though I came up as a scientist, I believe that ultimately the best sex, the sex that I want my clients to be having, is a spiritual experience.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's the long journey that I move people.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said,
And that
it's
doesn't
really
mean it has
not
to
that
be
hard.
totally serious every time. Like fun and play is also spiritual.
100%. And
Yeah.
I love having fun, almost to like a degree where I'm like, not everything has to be fun, Caitlin. But I don't know. I have to pack for
But it's
this
really
trip
nice
tomorrow.
when it is.
Could I make this fun?
Can we make
Yeah.
it more fun? And we all need a little more fun as adults, right?
Well, and I don't know about you. I'm in this position, like my job is very pleasure focused.
Yeah, me
and
too.
I'd like that way, and I want it to be that way. So I'm like, can we make this pleasurable? Even though maybe my story about it or my previous experiences of it are that like it's sticky and not fun. Like, can I let that go and inject some fun, play, and pleasure into all the things?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for describing your approach. So it's interesting because it's very, very similar. I mean, we have a very similar, and I think that must be because this is what works. But
Yeah.
And you tend to work with like more like groups and in online courses, right?
Well,
you still do one-on-one coaching or
I
no?
still do one-on-one coaching. I work with like 3 clients a year, but I have a team of coaches who work for me. My flagship course is Come When You Want. That is on premature ejaculation and lasting longer in bed. So everything that we discussed today, including all of the actual exercises, like the actual pelvic floor movement practice, the actual breathing exercise, the journaling, like all of that, even how I want you to like track your time over time, the changes in masturbation and everything, all exist in the Come When You Want course.
Awesome.
But I also some other courses that deal with like tips and techniques and yoni massage and linga massage and breast massage. Orgasms.
Cool. Okay. And we have a special offer for listeners here today for that Come When You Want course, which is 10% off if you use Laura Listener as the code. And I'm going to drop it in the show notes, but it's just Laura Listener, and you just put it in when you're signing up for Caitlin's course.
A special gift for your audience.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And I hope that, whether it's the person, whether you're listening and you're doing the premature ejaculation or your partner is, that course can be a really holistic approach for whatever it is that like needs to be best inside of your love life.
Yeah, awesome. And how do they find it? What's the URL for them to go to the course?
Well, certainly you can go to caitlinvneal.com/programs. And we'll also make sure that you have the URL.
I'll put that in
the
show notes too, everybody, so that you can access it.
And that's Laura Listener.
Yeah, code is Laura Listener. Thank you so much, Caitlin. This conversation was so fun. I really love your approach, and I really enjoyed talking to you.
Same. Thank you. It was really a delight to be here.
Want to come to Hawaii with me? If you are a woman or you know any, send them right to my homepage, laurajurgens.com. The Maui retreat info is there, and it is open for early bird registration. Don't miss it, and I get to see you in Hawaii.